Hi everybody and welcome to today's Art of Procurement podcast. I'm Philip Heidson, the founder and managing director of Art of Procurement. And as we all know, it's a really exciting time to be in procurement, especially with the pace of technological change. And so today's podcast is part of a special sponsored series that's taking part over the last 2 weeks of January 2020, where we aim to shine a light on the emerging and growth companies who are changing the way that leading procurement teams are driving outcomes that truly align with corporate objectives. And so we're going to ask an entrepreneur from 8 different companies questions about what gap in the market their solution addresses, how they differentiate their technology, and what the tools look like in action. It's a great way for you to get to know those who are truly leading the way when it comes to the digitization of procurement. In today's podcast, I talked to Stephany Lapierre of Tealbook. I first asked Stephany to share Tealbook's elevator pitch.
So Tealbook is really a big data company that uses AI to proactively grab information about every company in the world that does business with the enterprise. And we've really are solidifying our position as a trusted source of supplier data that powers a $20 billion and growing procurement software market.
So when you talk about information on the enterprise, what kind of information are you talking about?
Well, if you think about procurement today, they have access to a lot of information. There is a lot of data. It's not by lack of data. But data lives everywhere. It lives across systems. It lives outside the organization. It lives in people's head. And so it makes it incredibly difficult, as we know, for a company who has, 3,000, 10,000, 50,000. We have Fortune 100 customers who have up to 200,000 suppliers globally. And, if you think about the amount of information that needs to be collected, maintained, validated, and the sheer amount of data about those suppliers across the organization, I'd say, and our customers would say, it's an impossible task. And so what we've seen in the last couple of years is a huge movement to cloud technology, a big push on digital transformation, which you're all very aware of. And we've seen procurement teams, running to, frankly, partners that they trust, the procurement software companies that they've done business with, or telling a really good digitization story and a good data story. But unfortunately, what, procurement teams are facing now is that, yes, they're getting software and software works well, but the data has not been resolved. When we ask, and I often I speak at procurement conferences, I always start with 2 questions. The first question is, raise your hand if you have some confidence in the quality of your supplier data today. Mm-hmm. As you can imagine, everyone smiles. Yep. They look around. Nobody raises their hands. I say, some confidence. I say, okay, raise your hand if you believe that good quality data on your suppliers is absolutely critical to the digital procurement transformation. Mm-hmm. And then we get 100% of people raising their hands. And it lands incredibly well because we're talking about, who's invested in P2P software in the last couple of years. Right, the Coupas, the Rebas, Ivalua, Jaeger. There are the main players, and then others. And you'll have a pretty strong majority who have invested in technology, but still they're not raising their hands to have some confidence in the quality of their supplier data, and they believe it's so critical. So we have a huge data gap. There's a huge data problem right now, and it's actually impacting the return on the investment and the efficiency of all the dollars that are going and being poured into technology. And it's not the technology, it's not the software fault. They have great functionalities, They have great interface, they give transparency or automate workflow, but they need to be populated with data, and the data needs to be maintained, and the data needs to be useful to whoever is using the software. And if it's not, it's causing a ton of friction, delays, and even failure in digital procurement transformation today. And that's really what we're addressing with our technology.
So essentially, your technology sits at the center of the technology stack that a procurement organization would have. So then calling, the technology that may be doing things like P2P or supplier relationship management or risk management or whatever it may be, will then pull back into Tealbook to grab that information so that you know that you have that single source of truth, and the kind of everything is coming into that kind of the heart, I would say, of the tech stack from a data perspective.
Correct. I mean, you said it incredibly well. And the analogy I like to give to customers is that back in the day when you had your cell phone, it was not connected to the cloud. If you want to change your cell phone, there's a lot of frictions updating your data into the new phone. If you lost your cell phone, you lost all of your contacts, all your pictures or videos, whatever you took. As now, because your data's in the cloud, it doesn't matter which cell phone you have. It updates your laptop, your iPad, your Apple Watch, and you're not bound anymore to the technology. You're actually able to invest in the latest technology without very minimal friction to no friction, because your data is now in the cloud and your data is updated, and it's updating all of your your devices. So it's a very similar way to think about Tealbook is, you're building a data foundation that improves the completeness, will improve the trust, the level of insight that you can generate from the suppliers. And this is across all the different areas of procurement. We qualify our data in 5 different categories. One being all your capabilities. So through machine learning, really understanding not just classification and categorization, but what those suppliers actually do. Like, why limit the knowledge of your suppliers to 20% of your supplier base? What if you knew 100% of your supplier base, what they actually do and what you use them for and how you can leverage them better based on their product and services that they're providing? So the second category is contact information. So if you ask most procurement teams today if they can contact their entire supplier base for a change of policy or, to sign a code of conduct or whatever it may be, like, it's actually, I'd say most procurement teams say it's impossible. And so how do you maintain contact information across the different functions, not just for people, but also physical location? We're looking at, parent and child. Companies as well can be part of that categories. Then the third category, we're looking at risk, not replacing a third party, like a more robust third party risk management, but what's the transparency and the completeness of the information? So the more transparent, the more relevant, the more I can trust the data, but also feeding data that it's around financial, political, social risk data that we're able to then feed into a third party risk management system, or our customers can leverage to mitigate risk. And then the fourth category is all master data. So onboarding document, banking information, anything that is permission-based, that it's now automated in Tealbook. So it expedites not only onboarding tool, but it also really helps suppliers maintain all their record in one place. So it makes it much easier and faster for them to maintain, update, and also onboard. And then the fifth category is around all the accreditation. So anything that needs to be collected, maintained, typically on an annual basis, that needs to be reported. So we're talking ISO, GDPR, sustainability, diversity data. And so the ability for our customers to grab accurate, validated records so that they can improve the accuracy of their reporting and also increase their target. If they have certain targets, we can give them a lot of visibility into those suppliers based on the classification.
So you talked about the different types of content that you would be able to, that you basically hold and store and obviously feed into other systems. Those are coming from both internal and external sources. That's correct. So you're using data that obviously a company has access to themselves that they're generating, but you're also pulling in feeds from outside.
Correct. So unlike what we're used today is to buy a list of of data or buy just a one-way data feed, Tealbook is a dynamic record that includes data from the organization, and our machine learning uses that data to enrich the profile, to provide more completeness around the information. But we use also machine learning to expand, to look at where there's missed opportunity, where there's other suppliers that may be more competitive or innovative that look very similar, do business with very similar suppliers. So that can feed into a discovery use case. And it also looks at the existing supplier base. If we understand through machine learning we look at 300 different dimensions of what makes a supplier similar or not to another.
Right.
We can start looking at clusters of suppliers that in the vendor master that are very similar to one another. So those are opportunities for procurement team to see where they have a lot of duplication, how much instance of duplication. They can automate how they categorize suppliers to provide really strong suggestions or categorize suppliers for them. So that doesn't have to be done manually, but mostly is where can we consolidate? where there's opportunities to be able to reduce the number of suppliers in a way that's strategic, and in other categories where there's missed opportunities by looking at my vendor master compared to the industry, compared to the entire, world of suppliers. Where do I have gaps where I should tap into for increasing competitiveness, savings, innovation, diversity, sustainability, et cetera?
So you just announced very recently, in the last few days, that you have raised another round of investment. And first of all, congratulations on doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what's the plan? Like, how are you going to put that to work to strengthen Tealbook even further?
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think it's a huge validation that we've really found a good product market fit. I think when we start addressing the urgency around the investment that procurement team has made in technology, and how there's so much today that we're seeing in overrun budget and delays and friction and even failure, we're seeing a lot of procurement team looking for solution. And that's the message that we start, testing with the market without changing our technology. We just sort of reposition, because we're always about building data. We're always looking. We have data scientists in-house that have always been improving the completeness of those records. And that's landed at a time where procurement teams are now really looking for a solution outside of their traditional software providers. And so it's a sort of, we've started building this a few years ago. Our data continuously gets more robust and better. The market is now coming to a place where they recognize that leading a transformation with data and having a data strategy and data foundation is absolutely critical. And so it's all colliding, and it got us a lot of traction. We're closing larger deals, faster deals, and it got the investment community quite excited about the size of the opportunity, and also how fast the market is growing. And so we've got some new investors that are quite strategic. One of the investors is Workday Ventures, who recognize the importance of Tealbook to remain agnostic. So we're not, they haven't invested as a partnership. This is really the Workday Ventures who put some capital into Tealbook because they recognize the opportunity. Being Workday, knowing and understanding the space, that having a data foundation will be absolutely critical. And so they wanted to be involved. But I think that validates, enormously the opportunity that we have in front of us, and how the market is getting really excited about it.
Yeah, we definitely talk on the pod a lot about the data challenge, and how critical it is, but it's also something that up until now has been overlooked somewhat. And I think it's been overlooked because it's hard. And there hasn't been a lot of answers. And yet it drives so much. Sometimes we look at technology as being a silver bullet, but it almost doesn't matter what technology you have if you don't have access to good data to support it. So definitely something that's becoming, I think, more and more important for procurement teams to get a hand around. What I wanted to ask to kind of follow up on that is, when folks engage with Tealbook, what does that first step usually look like? Is there a pilot program? Do you do proof of concept? Do you look at a certain data stack or a certain division? How does that typically work?
Yeah, our team really tries to understand what our customers are trying to accomplish long term. Like, they really buy into the vision that they're going to be building their data foundation on Tealbook, but it doesn't happen overnight. And so what are the priorities? What data categories are they looking to complete first? How they would want eventually to integrate that data into their technology? That may not happen also on day one. We can look at the data and show them upfront what the enrichment looks like, so that they have a better sense of how the data can be, improved, and we can give them a sense of how the data can be used. But typically, when we start working with a client, we get the vendor master, and for us, the activation time is quite fast. But it gives a lot of insight up front that our customers can start gauging to be able to build their strategy. So we do have some lightweight, we have a beautiful interface that addresses some lightweight features that a mid-market company who has no technology or very little technology today can start leveraging. Yeah. Because then they would lead their transformation with their data strategy. They would deploy our interface to have quick wins. But if they want a more robust sourcing tool, they may want to go to Scout. If they want a more robust spend analytics, they may want supplier. If they want a full P2P, they would, that would be a huge investment of their time. And they would still adopt those technologies, but then they would plug it into Tealbook as opposed to having data stack in each of those technology over time. And then if a company already has their technology, they could still use Tealbook as a standalone to start with. That typically helps them identify use cases for the data, and then they can use it to feed and power a P2P implementation. They can use it if their P2P doesn't particularly provide a good supplier network, for example. That could be a use case. We have partnership ongoing with P2P that don't have a network. So their customers can tap into a discovery use case using Tealbook and things like that. So it's really, for us, understanding what the company and the procurement team is looking to accomplish. And our team is very consultative in terms of understanding and then being able to build the use case and build the key success factors that's going to ensure that our clients are going to have a successful rollout, and also build a roadmap for the future that will have them build this data foundation that's going to power their technology solution.
So if anyone who's listening who is interested in learning a little bit more about what you do and perhaps even how to take that first step, what's the best place for them to go to find out a little bit more about Tealbook?
Yeah, our new website came out last week. And so, we're always happy, even if it's just to have a conversation around what that looks like or some of the challenges that you may have. We'd love to have a conversation. So please go to tealbook.com. There is an opportunity to request a demo or to speak with someone on our team. And I know that our team will be very responsive, and we'll look forward to having that conversation.
Okay, great. Well, what I'll do is I will include a link to tealbook.com on the show notes page for today's episode. Listeners can find that by going to artofprocurement.com/podcast, which is where we host all the podcasts that we have on the show. You can just search for Tealbook there. Or if you go to artofprocurement.com/startup series, you'll find all the episodes from this special series hosted right there. So, Stephany, I want to thank you so much again for joining me on the podcast today. Thanks for tuning into this special startup series on the Art of Procurement. To listen to the entire series and for the show notes pages that accompany each episode, please go to artofprocurement.com/startup series.